My name is Sarah Mitchell, and at 28, I thought I knew my family. That illusion shattered the morning I found my grandmother's vintage wedding dress, the one I'd dreamed of wearing since childhood, cut cleanly in half with fabric scissors. My mother stood in my childhood bedroom, tears streaming down her face, while my father clutched a crumpled letter. The dress, with its delicate French lace and pearl buttons, lay destroyed on my pink carpet like a wounded bird. What they told me next would unravel everything I believed about love, loyalty, and the people who raised me. Before we dive into this story of family betrayal and ultimate justice, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit that like button if you've ever felt blindsided by family drama, and subscribe because this story has more twists than a roller coaster. Trust me, you won't see the ending coming. 3 weeks before my wedding to Marcus, my college sweetheart and fellow naval officer, I'd come home to finalize details with my parents. They'd insisted on hosting the reception at our family estate, claiming they wanted to give me the perfect day. I should have questioned their sudden enthusiasm. They'd been lukewarm about Marcus from the beginning, making subtle comments about his modest background and uncertain future prospects. The destroyed dress was just the beginning. Through my mother's sobbing confession, the truth emerged like a festering wound being lanced. My parents had been systematically sabotaging my relationship with Marcus for 2 years. They'd intercepted love letters during my deployment, deleted voicemails, and even went so far as to forge a breakup letter in my handwriting, sending it to Marcus while I was stationed overseas without communication access. "We did it for your own good," my father said, his voice devoid of remorse. "Marcus isn't suitable for our family. We've arranged for you to meet Jonathan Whitmore at the country club. His father owns the largest shipping company on the East Coast." My mother clutched my arm with desperate fingers. "Sarah, darling, you have to understand. We've already told everyone the wedding is off. The invitations for Jonathan's introduction party go out tomorrow. We've invested too much in this family's reputation to let you throw it away on some nobody from Nebraska." The betrayal cut deeper than any blade. These people, who'd raised me, who'd taught me about honor and integrity, had spent months methodically destroying my happiness for their social climbing ambitions. They'd convinced Marcus I'd abandoned him, leading him to believe I'd chosen career over love when the opposite was true. I'd been desperately trying to reach him. My hands shook as I picked up pieces of my grandmother's dress. This wasn't just fabric, it was history, tradition, and dreams woven together. My grandmother had worn it during World War II, marrying my grandfather before he shipped out to the Pacific. Shed saved it through decades, dreaming of passing it down through generations. Now it lay in ruins, sacrificed on the altar of my parents' ambition. "You destroyed Grandma's dress," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "We can buy you 10 dresses that cost more than her entire wardrobe," my mother snapped, her grief transforming into defensiveness. "Stop being so dramatic. Jonathan's a wonderful man, and his family has connections that will secure your future in ways that farm boy never could." The casual cruelty in her voice ignited something cold and calculating inside me. These people had raised me to believe in duty, honor, and service to country. They'd pushed me toward the Naval Academy, celebrated my achievements, and supported my military career, but only when it served their purposes. Now I understood why they'd been so encouraging about my naval service. It wasn't pride in my accomplishments. It was strategic positioning for social advancement. Standing in that room, surrounded by the wreckage of my dreams and faced with the calculating coldness of people I'd loved unconditionally, I made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't just walk away from this betrayal. I would ensure that their cruelty was exposed, their schemes unraveled, and justice served with the precision and thoroughness my military training had taught me. My phone buzzed with a text from my maid of honor, confirming the bachelorette party for the following weekend. My parents had no idea that Marcus and I had maintained contact through secure military channels they couldn't access. They'd succeeded in creating chaos and confusion, but they hadn't succeeded in destroying our relationship. If anything, their interference had taught us to communicate more effectively and trust each other more deeply. Looking at my parents, I realized I was staring at strangers wearing familiar faces. The people who'd raised me wouldn't have been capable of such calculated manipulation, but the evidence was undeniable. and the damage was done. Now it was time for them to learn that underestimating a trained naval officer was their first and most critical mistake. That night, I sat in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by the remnants of my grandmother's dress, and began planning with the methodical precision that had earned me commendations in the Navy. My parents had declared war on my happiness. They just didn't know I was equipped to fight back with weapons they couldn't even comprehend. First, I documented everything. Every forged letter, every deleted message, every lie they'd told our extended family about the wedding cancellation. My naval intelligence training proved invaluable as I traced their digital footprints, recovering deleted emails and phone records that painted a damning picture of their interference. They'd been sloppy, overconfident in their technological superiority over their simple military daughter. My mother had used her garden club connections to spread rumors about Marcus being unreliable and commitment-phobic. Shed told our church congregation that I was having doubts about the marriage. Most devastatingly, Shed contacted Marcus' commanding officer, claiming I'd requested a transfer to avoid an unsuitable personal entanglement. The scope of their sabotage was breathtaking in its thoroughness and cruelty. But they'd made one crucial error. They'd underestimated both my investigative capabilities and my network of loyal friends who'd noticed inconsistencies in their stories. My best friend from the academy, Lieutenant Commander Jessica Torres, had been tracking the discrepancies for months, sensing something wasn't right when my communications with Marcus became strained and erratic. "Sarah, I've been documenting everything," Jessica told me during our encrypted video call that night. "Your mother called Admiral Harrison's wife, claiming you were having a mental health crisis and needed family intervention to prevent you from making a terrible mistake. Mrs. Harrison mentioned it to me because she was concerned about you." The pieces fell into place like a precision bombing strategy. My parents had weaponized their social connections, my military career, and even concerns about my mental health to destroy my relationship. They'd painted themselves as caring parents trying to save their daughter from a disastrous decision, while simultaneously portraying me as unstable and Marcus as manipulative. I spent the next 72 hours in what I called operational mode. Every phone call was recorded, every conversation documented, every lie cataloged with timestamps and witnesses. My parents, believing they'd successfully cornered me, became increasingly bold in their admissions. They spoke freely about their intervention plans, their strategies for introducing me to Jonathan, and their timeline for announcing our engagement by Christmas. "Marcus was never going to be able to provide the lifestyle you deserve," my father explained over dinner, completely unaware that I was recording everything. "His family owns a small farm, Sarah. Do you want to spend your retirement years worried about crop yields and livestock prices? Jonathan can offer you security, social position, and opportunities Marcus never could." My mother nodded enthusiastically. "We've already spoken to the country club about membership. Jonathan's mother is on the board of 3 different charities. Think about the connections, the opportunities for advancement. Your military career could open doors to defense contracting positions that pay 10 times what you make now." Their casual discussion of my life as a commodity to be traded for social advantage crystallized my resolve. These people hadn't just betrayed me. They'd revealed themselves to be calculating manipulators who viewed relationships as business transactions. They'd destroyed my grandmother's dress because it represented a love story they couldn't monetize or control. But they'd forgotten one crucial detail about my character, something they should have remembered from raising me. I don't retreat when attacked. I regroup, analyze the battlefield, and strike back with overwhelming force at the moment of maximum impact. The wedding was still scheduled for 3 weeks away. Everyone on Marcus' side believed it was proceeding as planned because WED maintained communication through channels my parents couldn't access. Our extended family and friends were confused by conflicting information, but most had decided to wait and see rather than take sides in what appeared to be pre-wedding jitters. My parents had made another critical error in their assumption that I would comply with their demands once cornered. They'd never bothered to truly understand the person their daughter had become through military training and leadership development. They saw the obedient child who'd followed their guidance through high school and college, not recognizing the strategic thinker and decorated officer who'd learned to outmaneuver hostile forces in high-stakes situations. As I methodically planned my response, I realized this wasn't just about my wedding anymore. This was about exposing a pattern of manipulation that had probably shaped my entire life in ways I was just beginning to understand. How many opportunities had they redirected? How many relationships had they influenced? How many decisions had been mine versus theirs? The destroyed wedding dress would be rebuilt, but not in the way they expected. Justice would be served, but not in a courtroom. And when the dust settled, everyone would know exactly who Sarah Mitchell really was, not the compliant daughter they'd tried to create, but the woman I'd become despite their efforts to control my destiny. The next phase required careful alliance building, and fortunately, my parents' deception had created unexpected allies among people who'd been confused by the conflicting stories. Aunt Margaret, my father's sister and family matriarch, had been suspicious from the beginning when my mother claimed I was having doubts about Marcus while simultaneously planning an elaborate country club introduction to Jonathan. Something didn't add up, Aunt Margaret confided during our private lunch meeting. You've talked about Marcus with stars in your eyes for 3 years. The idea that you'd suddenly develop cold feet never made sense. Plus, I've met him at family gatherings. That boy worships the ground you walk on. Through Aunt Margaret, I learned that my parents had been positioning themselves for a social coup that went far beyond my marriage. Jonathan's family wasn't just wealthy, they were political power brokers with connections to defense contracting and naval procurement. My father's struggling law practice needed high-profile clients, and my mother's social aspirations required access to exclusive circles that the Whitmore family could provide. They see you as their golden ticket, Aunt Margaret explained, her voice heavy with disappointment. Your naval rank, your security clearance, your academy credentials combined with the Whitmore connections would solve all their financial and social problems. They're not thinking about your happiness, they're thinking about their retirement plans. The revelation was both heartbreaking and liberating. My accomplishments, which I'd thought made them proud, were merely assets they hoped to leverage for personal gain. Every medal, every promotion, every achievement had been catalogued not as a daughter's success, but as capital to be invested in their social climbing schemes. But they'd severely miscalculated the loyalty of our extended family and community. My grandmother's friends at the church, who'd known me since childhood, began asking uncomfortable questions about why my parents were speaking so negatively about Marcus, a young man that all met and approved of during previous visits. My cousins started comparing notes about the conflicting stories they'd received about wedding plans and timeline changes. Most importantly, Marcus' family hadn't been sitting idle. His mother, a retired schoolteacher with a backbone of steel, had been conducting her own investigation into the sudden communication breakdown between Marcus and me. Shed noticed that my letters had stopped arriving at the same time Marcus claimed to have received a breakup letter that didn't sound like my voice at all. The letter was formal and cold. Mrs. Patterson told me during our emotional phone call. It read like a legal document, not something written by a woman in love. I knew something was wrong, but Marcus was devastated and refused to discuss it further. That poor boy has been heartbroken for months. Through Mrs. Patterson, I learned that Marcus had requested a transfer to another base, believing I no longer wanted contact with him. Had thrown himself into his work with the desperate intensity of someone trying to outrun emotional pain. My parents' interference had nearly destroyed a man I loved, and that realization transformed my anger into something far more dangerous. Calculated fury, backed by strategic thinking and unlimited resources. Jessica Torres became my operational commander, helping coordinate intelligence gathering from multiple sources. Shed quietly reached out to my academy classmates, many of whom now held significant positions throughout the Navy, asking them to verify details about my supposed mental health concerns and career doubts. The responses painted a clear picture. No one in my professional circle had noticed any signs of instability or relationship troubles. Your parents played a dangerous game when they involved your commanding officers, Jessica warned. Making false claims about a service member's mental fitness is a federal offense. They opened themselves up to serious legal consequences. But legal action wasn't my primary objective. I wanted something far more satisfying. Complete exposure of their deception in front of everyone they'd tried to impress. They'd used social manipulation as their weapon of choice. It would also be their downfall. The country club introduction party they'd planned for the following weekend became my target. They'd sent invitations to everyone in their social circle, announcing it as a celebration of new beginnings and promising to introduce me to someone very special. The guest list read like a who's who of local society, including the very people my parents most wanted to impress. I began making my own phone calls, reaching out to family, friends, extended relatives, and community members who'd received confusing information about my wedding status. I didn't reveal my parents' deception yet. Instead, I simply asked questions that highlighted the inconsistencies in their stories and invited everyone to attend the country club event to learn the truth about my future plans. My mother, oblivious to the storm gathering around her, spent the week shopping for the perfect outfit and coordinating with the country club staff. Shed hired a photographer, ordered elaborate floral arrangements, and even arranged for a small orchestra to provide background music. The event was designed to be her social triumph, the moment when the Mitchell family claimed their place among the town's elite. She had no idea she was planning her own social funeral. The guest list had grown beyond their original invitations as word spread about the mysterious celebration. Family members were flying in from out of state, curious about the dramatic change in my wedding plans. Church friends who'd known me since childhood were attending, along with several of my academy classmates who happened to be in the area. My parents interpreted the growing attendance as validation of their social standing and evidence that their manipulation had been successful. They couldn't see that they'd actually created the perfect audience for their complete humiliation. Everything was falling into place for what would become known in our family as the night Sarah Mitchell reminded everyone never to underestimate a naval officer. But first, I had one more crucial alliance to secure, the only one that really mattered. It was time to contact Marcus and let him know that reports of our relationship's death had been greatly exaggerated. The Marcus phone call changed everything. When I finally reached him through secure military channels, explaining the truth about my parents' interference, the relief in his voice nearly broke my heart. "I thought you'd stopped loving me," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "That letter was so cold, so final. I've been dying inside for months. I never stopped fighting for us," I told him, "and now we're going to show everyone exactly what that means." Marcus flew in the day before the country club event, staying with his aunt in the neighboring town to avoid detection. My parents, busy with their final preparations, never noticed the additional surveillance that had quietly surrounded them. Jessica Torres had coordinated with several of my academy classmates, who were now stationed at nearby bases, creating a network of witnesses and support that my parents couldn't have imagined. The morning of their celebration, I appeared at breakfast wearing my dress blues, my ribbons and insignia polished to perfection. My mother's face went pale when she saw me in uniform instead of the cocktail dress she'd selected for my introduction to Jonathan. "Sarah, what are you doing? The party is this afternoon. You need to change into something appropriate for meeting Jonathan's family." I smiled with the cold precision that had served me well in hostile negotiations. "Oh, I'm dressed perfectly for what I have planned." My father's lawyer instincts finally activated, but too late. "Sarah, you're making a mistake. Think about your future, your career prospects. The Whitmores can open doors that Farm Boy never could." "Funny you should mention career prospects," I replied, placing a manila folder on the breakfast table. "I've been reviewing some interesting documents about false statements made to military personnel and interference with naval communications. Did you know that impersonating someone in written correspondence with active duty military is a federal offense?" The color drained from both their faces as they realized I'd documented everything. But I wasn't finished. Not even close. The country club event began at 3 o'clock, with guests arriving to find an elegant setup that screamed of desperate social climbing. My parents had spared no expense, transforming the main ballroom into what looked like a political fundraiser rather than an intimate family gathering. They'd even hired a local society photographer and arranged for coverage in the town's social pages. Jonathan Whitmore arrived with his parents, clearly expecting to meet a compliant young woman grateful for their family's attention. He was handsome in a generic, privileged way, with the soft confidence that comes from never facing real adversity. His parents surveyed the crowd with the calculating eyes of people accustomed to evaluating others' usefulness to their social empire. My parents positioned themselves near the entrance, greeting guests with the nervous energy of people whose entire social future depended on the next 2 hours going perfectly. They'd crafted a narrative about my mature decision to end an inappropriate relationship and embrace better opportunities for my future. At exactly 4 o'clock, as my father prepared to make his announcement, the ballroom doors opened to admit several unexpected guests. Marcus entered first, wearing his dress whites with the crisp perfection that marked him as a career military officer. His ribbons told the story of a man who'd earned respect through service and sacrifice, not inheritance and connections. Behind him came Jessica Torres and 5 other academy graduates, all in dress uniform, all walking with the measured precision that instantly commanded attention. The sight of 7 decorated naval officers entering the room in formation created a silence that spread like ripples across water. My parents stood frozen as I rose from my table near the front of the room, my own uniform commanding attention as I moved to join my fellow officers. The guests, most of whom had known me since childhood, began to understand that something significant was happening, something far different from the introduction party they'd expected. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying the authority I'd learned to project in military briefings. "Thank you for coming to what my parents described as a celebration of new beginnings." They were more accurate than they knew. My mother's face had gone ashen as she realized the evening was no longer under her control. Jonathan Whitmore looked confused, clearly sensing that his carefully orchestrated introduction was going off script. His parents exchanged glances that suggested they were reconsidering their investment in the Mitchell family alliance. "For the past several months," I continued, "my parents have been telling many of you that I was having doubts about my engagement to Lieutenant Marcus Patterson. They claimed I was unstable, unreliable, and in need of family intervention to save me from making a terrible mistake." The guests shifted uncomfortably, many of them recognizing their own conversations with my parents in my words. Aunt Margaret nodded grimly from her front row seat, her expression confirming that she'd been expecting this moment. "What they didn't tell you is that they'd been systematically intercepting our communications, forging breakup letters, and spreading false information to both our families and our commanding officers. They destroyed my grandmother's wedding dress because it represented a love story they couldn't control or monetize." The gasp that went through the room was audible. My grandmother's dress was legendary in our family and community, a symbol of wartime romance and enduring love that had inspired generations of young women. Marcus stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. "For 6 months, I believed Sarah had abandoned our relationship. I received a forged letter claiming she no longer loved me, while she was deployed without regular communication access. Her parents convinced my commanding officer that she was mentally unstable and posed a security risk." The implications hit the room like a physical blow. These weren't just relationship games. They were potentially treasonous acts that could have destroyed 2 military careers and compromised national security. "But here's what my parents never understood," I said, my voice rising with controlled emotion. "They raised me to believe in honor, integrity, and service to something greater than myself. They taught me to fight for what's right and never surrender to bullies or manipulators. They just never imagined I'd apply those lessons to them." Jonathan Whitmore's father had heard enough. The Whitmore family reputation couldn't survive association with people who'd potentially committed federal crimes to force a social alliance. They gathered their things and left without a word, their exit serving as a clear verdict on my parents' schemes. "The wedding you all received conflicting information about is still happening," Marcus announced, his voice filled with quiet strength. "Next weekend, as originally planned. Sarah and I will be married in a ceremony that honors both love and truth, something my future in-laws apparently can't understand." My parents stood in their ruined party, surrounded by guests who now understood the depth of their deception. The social triumph they'd orchestrated had become their complete humiliation, witnessed by everyone they'd hoped to impress. But I wasn't finished. Justice required one final element. The exodus began immediately. One by one, guests approached Marcus and me to offer congratulations and apologies for believing my parents' lies. Aunt Margaret hugged me fiercely, whispering, "Your grandmother would be so proud of how you handled this." The church ladies, who'd known me since I was old enough to sit still during service, formed a protective circle around us, their disapproval of my parents' actions clear and unwavering. My parents stood abandoned in their elaborate party setup, the hired photographer still snapping pictures of their social downfall. My mother's carefully applied makeup had streaked down her face, and my father's confident demeanor had crumbled into the posture of a man realizing he'd miscalculated catastrophically. "Sarah, please," my mother pleaded as the last guests filed out. "We can fix this. We can explain to people that we were just trying to protect you." "Protect me from what?" I demanded. "From happiness? From love? From making my own choices? You destroyed Grandma's dress, Mom. You cut it in half because it represented something you couldn't control." The weight of that destruction seemed to hit her for the first time. My grandmother's dress hadn't just been fabric and lace. It was family history, a tangible connection to a love story that had survived war, poverty, and decades of challenges. By destroying it, she'd severed more than material, she'd broken a sacred trust that connected generations of women in our family. My father, ever the lawyer, tried a different approach. "We'll face legal consequences for this, won't we?" Jessica Torres stepped forward, her expression coldly professional. "Interfering with military communications is a federal offense. Making false statements about a service member's mental fitness to commanding officers constitutes fraud. Impersonating someone in written correspondence with active duty personnel violates multiple federal statutes." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "Sarah has documented everything. The choice of whether to pursue prosecution belongs to her." The threat hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. My parents had gambled their daughter's happiness for social advancement, and now faced the possibility of criminal charges that would destroy not just their social standing, but my father's legal career and their financial security. But watching them crumble in their empty party, surrounded by the wreckage of their schemes, I realized that legal punishment would be redundant. They'd already received the most devastating sentence possible for people like them: complete social exile from the community that desperately wanted to impress. "I won't pursue federal charges," I announced, watching relief flood their faces. "But there will be conditions." My father straightened hopefully, his legal mind immediately shifting to negotiation mode. "What kind of conditions?" "You will personally contact every person who received misinformation about Marcus and me, explaining that you lied and apologizing for your deception. You will write formal letters to our commanding officers, retracting every false statement you made about our mental fitness and reliability. And you will pay for the restoration of Grandma's dress by the most skilled textile conservator on the East Coast." My mother's face crumpled. "The dress was cut completely in half. It can't be repaired." "Then you'll pay for an identical replica to be handmade by artisans who specialize in vintage restoration. Every pearl button, every piece of lace, every stitch will be recreated exactly as it was. And you'll present it to me at the wedding you tried to prevent." The financial implications were staggering. Authentic vintage dress replication by master craftspeople would cost tens of thousands of dollars, money they'd already spent on their failed social climbing schemes. But the symbolic weight was even heavier. They would be forced to rebuild what they'd destroyed, acknowledging that their daughter's happiness had value beyond their ability to monetize it. "And one more thing," I added, my voice carrying the finality of a military order. "You will never, ever interfere in my personal relationships again. You will not offer opinions about my career choices, my friends, my husband, or my future children. You burned through your parental advisory privileges when you chose manipulation over trust." Marcus moved to stand beside me, his presence both protective and supportive. The sight of us together, two decorated officers who'd weathered deliberate sabotage and emerged stronger, seemed to finally convince my parents that their war was lost. The country club staff began cleaning up around us, stacking chairs and collecting the elaborate floral arrangements that had been meant to celebrate my parents' social triumph. The photographer they'd hired approached cautiously, asking if they wanted prints of the event. My mother's hysterical laughter at the question echoed through the nearly empty ballroom. As we prepared to leave, my father made one last attempt at salvaging some dignity. "Sarah, we're still your parents. Despite everything that's happened, we love you." I turned back to face them. These people who'd raised me but never truly known me. Love doesn't destroy what makes someone happy. Love doesn't manipulate and lie and sabotage. Love trusts and supports and celebrates. What you did wasn't love, it was possession. And I'm no longer your property to be traded for social advantage. The words hung between us like a final judgment, marking the end of one relationship and the beginning of another. They would always be my biological parents, but they'd forfeited the right to be my family through their choices. Family, I'd learned, was about more than shared genetics. It was about shared values, mutual respect, and unconditional support. Marcus and I walked out of the country club together, leaving my parents to face the consequences of their actions. Behind us, the elaborate party setup looked like the aftermath of a social disaster, which was exactly what it had been. The real celebration was just beginning. 1 week later, Marcus and I were married in the base chapel, where we'd first met during an academy mixer 4 years earlier. The ceremony was everything my parents' country club spectacle had not been: authentic, intimate, and filled with people who genuinely loved and supported us. Jessica Torres served as my maid of honor, while Marcus' younger brother stood as best man. The chapel filled with our fellow officers, Marcus' farming family from Nebraska, and the chosen family wed built through shared values and mutual respect. I walked down the aisle wearing the most beautiful dress I'd ever seen, not my grandmother's original, which was being painstakingly restored by artisans in New York, but a stunning gown that Aunt Margaret had secretly commissioned as her wedding gift to me. Your grandmother would want you to have something new to start your own story, Shed explained when she presented it to me the night before. My parents attended, sitting in the back row and looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. True to our agreement, they'd spent the week writing apology letters, making humbling phone calls, and watching their social standing crumble as word spread about their manipulation tactics. The country club had quietly suggested they might be more comfortable finding a different social venue, and several of my father's clients had terminated their relationships after learning about his personal conduct. But I wasn't focused on their discomfort. I was focused on Marcus' face as I approached the altar, on the joy radiating from our real friends and family, and on the future we were finally free to build together without interference or sabotage. The reception was held at the Base Officers Club, with decorations that honored both our military service and our personal love story. Marcus' mother had worked with mine to create a photo timeline of our relationship, including pictures my parents had tried to hide or destroy. The display served as a visible reminder that love perseveres, even when others try to tear it down. During our first dance, Marcus whispered, "Thank you for fighting for us when I couldn't fight anymore. We're military," I whispered back. "We never leave anyone behind, especially each other." 6 months later, we were both promoted and transferred to a joint assignment in California, 3,000 miles away from my parents' sphere of influence. The distance provided healing space and perspective, allowing us to build our marriage on the foundation of trust and communication developed during our separation. My grandmother's restored dress arrived 2 weeks before our first anniversary, accompanied by a note from the textile conservator explaining that every thread had been lovingly repaired or replaced with period-accurate materials. The dress looked exactly as it had in my childhood memories, but now it carried additional meaning. It represented not just my grandmother's love story, but the resilience of love itself in the face of those who would destroy it. My parents and I established a careful détente built around clear boundaries and limited contact. They learned to treat Marcus with the respect they should have shown from the beginning, though the relationship remained formal and distant. My mother occasionally sent cards on holidays, and my father made awkward attempts at small talk during our rare phone conversations. But the easy intimacy of my childhood relationship with them never returned. I came to understand that their actions had revealed fundamental differences in our values that couldn't be overcome through apologies or time. They valued appearance over authenticity, control over trust, and social position over genuine happiness. These weren't temporary character flaws, they were core beliefs that would always put us at odds. But their betrayal had taught me something invaluable about the difference between biological family and chosen family. The people who surrounded Marcus and me at our wedding, who celebrated our promotions, and who would stand by us through whatever challenges lay ahead, these were our real family, bound not by genetics but by love, loyalty, and shared commitment to each other's well-being. 2 years after our wedding, when Marcus and I welcomed our first child, my parents sent an expensive gift and a card, expressing hope for new beginnings. They weren't invited to meet their granddaughter immediately, but we left the door open for a relationship built on respect rather than manipulation. The lesson I learned from my family's betrayal wasn't that blood relations don't matter, it's that they matter less than character, integrity, and the choice to love without conditions. My parents had shown me who they really were when they thought they could control my future for their benefit. I believed them, set appropriate boundaries, and built my happiness with people who proved worthy of my trust. Looking back on that devastating morning when I found my grandmother's dress cut in half, I realize it marked the end of my childhood illusions about family loyalty and the beginning of my adult understanding of what real love looks like. Sometimes the greatest gift toxic family members can give you is showing their true nature clearly enough that you stop making excuses for them and start building a life with people who actually deserve your presence. My parents taught me about honor, duty, and service values that served me well in the military and in life. They just never intended for me to apply those values to evaluating their behavior. When I did, I found them lacking, and I chose to surround myself with people who met the standards they'd taught me to expect. That choice transformed what could have been a story of family destruction into one of personal liberation and authentic love. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting free and building something beautiful with people who would never dream of tearing it down. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own happiness? When someone shows you who they really are, do you believe them? Drop a comment below sharing your own family karma story. I read every one and love connecting with people who understand that sometimes the strongest families are the ones we choose rather than the ones we're born into. Hit that like button if this story resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life drama with satisfying endings, and share this with anyone who needs to hear that they deserve relationships built on respect rather than manipulation. Thank you for taking this journey with me. And remember, your happiness is worth fighting for, even when the people who should protect it are the ones trying to destroy it. Sometimes standing up for yourself teaches everyone around you how you deserve to be treated, and that's a lesson worth learning.